The desert wind howled over the red mesas of Arizona, carrying dust, silence, and memories of the dead. For 15 years, Jacob Hollister had lived alone on his ranch, a stretch of land so dry it seemed cursed by heaven itself. The folks in town called him the Lone Rancher. He didn't correct them. After his wife and infant son died in a cholera outbreak, Jacob had closed his heart to the world. No church, no neighbors, no laughter, just cattle, wind, and the sound of his boots on parched earth. Every evening he sat by the dying fire, staring at a faded photograph of the family he'd lost. He'd long stopped praying. The land had taken too much from him already. But fate wasn't done with Jacob Hollister. It happened one blazing afternoon. Jacob was out by the southern fence line when he saw something moving far across the plain, a shadow on horseback, moving slow but steady through the heat. He raised his hand to block the sun and narrowed his eyes. When the rider drew closer, he saw it was a woman. Her long black hair was braided with red beads, her face proud and sun-browned, her clothes worn but strong. Cradled in her arms was a child, wrapped in a blanket. She stopped 10 feet away, her horse breathing hard. For a long moment, they just stared at each other, two souls who'd seen too much loneliness. Then she spoke, her voice low but firm. "You are Jacob Hollister." He nodded cautiously. "Who's asking?" "My name is Yana," she said. "I am Chiricahua Apache. My husband died 3 moons ago. The soldiers burned our home. My child." She looked down at the sleeping bundle. "My child needs a father." Jacob blinked, certain he'd misheard. "Ma'am, you must have the wrong man." She dismounted slowly, her movements graceful but tired. "You are a man with no wife, no tribe, no child. I am a woman with no husband, no home, and a child with no father. The spirits brought me here." Jacob's throat tightened. "Lady, I'm no one's savior." She looked straight into his eyes. "Maybe not, but my boy doesn't need a savior. He needs a man who knows how to build, not destroy." He wanted to tell her to leave, that he didn't have room in his life or his heart for anyone. But something in her voice, something unbroken yet deeply wounded, made him hesitate. So he said quietly, "You can rest here tonight. There's food inside. You and the boy can have the bed. I'll sleep out by the fire." She nodded. "We accept your kindness, Jacob Hollister." That night, as the desert cooled and the stars came out, Jacob sat by the fire listening to the faint sound of the child breathing inside the cabin. It had been years since another human sound had filled that space. For the first time in a long time, the silence didn't hurt. Days turned into weeks. Yana stayed, helping with the chores, tending to the animals, cooking meals over the open flame. Her boy, Koa, followed Jacob everywhere, his tiny boots kicking up dust behind him. At first, Jacob kept his distance. He told himself they'd leave soon. But the boy had a laugh that broke through even the thickest armor. He'd hand Jacob tools while he fixed the fence, pretending to be a cowboy like Papa Jake. In Ayana, she carried herself with quiet strength. She could mend a saddle, ride a horse like a warrior, and speak to the land as though it were alive. One morning, Jacob caught her standing barefoot in the field, whispering something in Apache to the wind. He asked, "What are you saying?" She smiled faintly. "I am asking the spirits to make this land kind again. It's been lonely too long." Jacob looked away, his throat tight. "Yeah," he said softly, "it has." But peace never lasted long in those days. One afternoon, a group of cavalry riders appeared at the ranch. Their leader, a captain with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue, demanded to know if Jacob was harboring an Apache woman and her half-breed child. Jacob stood tall on his porch. "They're under my protection." The captain sneered. "That woman's husband killed 3 of my men at San Simon. She belongs in custody." Jacob's hand tightened on his rifle. "Not while I'm breathing." A tense silence followed. The captain finally spat on the ground. "You've got 48 hours to hand her over. After that, we come back." They rode off in a storm of dust. That night, Ayanna stood by the fire, her face hard. "You should have let them take me. I will not have you die for us." Jacob turned sharply. "I buried my family once. I'm not burying another, not while I can stand." She looked at him for a long time, then whispered, "You speak like a man who's already lost everything." He met her eyes. "Maybe I did until you showed up." The next 2 days were a blur of preparation. Jacob moved the horses, fortified the barn, and loaded his rifle. Ayanna stood beside him, bow in hand. When the soldiers returned at dawn, the ranch was ready. Gunfire echoed through the desert. Dust rose, horses screamed, and for a moment it seemed the world itself was ending. When it was over, the soldiers were gone. Ayanna had an arrow wound on her arm, Jacob a graze across his ribs, but the boy was safe. As the sun rose over the quiet battlefield, Ayanna turned to him, tears glistening in her eyes. "You could have run. You could have left us." Jacob smiled weakly. "And go back to being alone. No, ma'am, I think the desert had enough ghosts." She stepped closer, her voice trembling. "Then let me tell you what the spirits say now, Jacob Hollister." He raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" She placed a hand on his chest. "They say my child has found his father." Jacob's breath caught. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then he looked down at little Koa clutching Jacob's hat, smiling up at him, and something inside him broke open. He knelt, placing a calloused hand on the boy's shoulder. "Guess that makes me your old man now, huh?" Koa giggled. "Papa Jake." And Ayanna, the widow who had come out of nowhere with fire in her heart, leaned her head against Jacob's shoulder as the sun bathed the land in gold. Months later, the townsfolk stopped calling him the Lone Rancher. They called him the man who built a home where the desert used to be silent. Every morning, laughter echoed through the valley again, the laughter of a boy, a mother, and a man who'd finally found his reason to live. And sometimes, when the wind blew just right, Jacob would swear he could hear the spirits whisper back, "The land remembers love."